Welcome to the second video in our Team Black Sheep Vendetta series. In the first video we actually took a look at all the different parts as they come in the kit, and we also took the electronics out of this main body section and had a look at what was actually inside. Now, as we've already said in the previous video, all of the electronics that come as part of the TBS Vendetta, so the power cube, the on-screen display and the video transmitter, are all covered in our existing Power Cube series. So if you want to go and have a look in there, that will actually cover all of the technology, how you change things, set things up, and also how you flash things like the Power Cube with different firmware and settings as well. Now the great thing is that this model actually comes with all of those pieces already, and in that previous video we actually went through all of the parts in the box. So in this one we're going to actually put this thing together and get it flying. So there are only 3 steps according to the instructions that come as part of the kit, and the 3 steps are covered here on the actual arms themselves. Step 1, install the receiver, slide out the plastic tray, connect the receiver to the receiver cable, strap down with tape, bind and configure for clean flight. Step 2, mount the arms, plug in the arms to maximise motor distance, use the 2mm hex driver to fashion the screws, then put the cover on, and then finally, when we're happy, install the props. So the first one we're going to do here then is we're going to install the receiver. So the receiver itself is pretty straightforward to pop in. We are going to be using a little XSR from FrSky. This is the new really small receiver. I'm going to put a link here to the other video where we actually do an overview of those things. To put it in and install it is really straightforward. You undo the 2 screws at the front of this main chassis, pull the cover off, and then pull all of the electronics out of the middle piece. Then underneath, what you have is you have a little cable, just like we saw in the original video. There's a cable underneath here that's ready for PPM or S-bus connections. So here we have my little XSR that I've already bound to a radio using a standard 5-channel setup. So elevator, aileron, rudder, throttle, and 1 set for 3 positions for flight modes. And I've plugged it into here, into the S-bus connector. So that should be all of the wiring we need for the receiver. What I have done then is I've pushed the antennas up through these guide holes on each side of the chassis so that they come out the top, and we'll eventually cover those with the straws that come as part of the kit. There's no point in doing that now because we actually need to be able to slide it back into the body, and if we put the straws in here it'll mean we can't flex these out the way. The only tip I'd give you here is, because of all the other wires that are around in here that are in the middle of this model, it's worthwhile getting hold of something like a thick bobby pin, which is what I used here, just to wiggle around and open up the gaps here to allow me to take the antennas through. Now with things like the XSR that have longer antennas, it would have worked a little bit nicer because I could have probably routed the aerials around this side in this little channel here and then up through, but because the antennas are very slightly shorter on these little XSRs, which is perfect for this model because, as you can see, there's not a lot of room in here, but it's lots of room under that XSR. Because those shorter antennas, I wanted the maximum to be proud of this wonderful carbon fibre enclosure. So that's that bit done. Really straightforward, really easy. We can then plug it all back together, and this is why making sure that these antennas are not in the straws before we put it back in is really handy, because now as we slide it in they kind of pop up into position, and one of the last things we'll do is actually put them together. So now we have our receiver in there, and hopefully you can kind of see how much space there is still underneath, so it's a nice neat installation. I can still get to the bind button under here for the receiver, so that should be good. What I need to do now is I actually need to pop the front back on and to screw home those front 2 pieces. Once we've done that, then let's come back and we'll have a look at actually plugging in the arms. So step 2 is to mount the arms. So plug in the arms to maximise motor distance, use 2mm hex driver to fasten arms with 3x9 screws and cover with plastic and 2x9 screws. That's what we're doing now. So we need this bag of bits that come as part of the kit. We empty all this out here carefully. Then there are the little bits of heat shrink that we can use to mount the antennas, so we'll just put those somewhere safe. We have 2 of these covers for the bottoms of each of the arms, and then we also have the screws that go underneath, and those are for the 2mm hex driver. So let's take off the rest of this cardboard from the arms. We can take a very quick close look at the connections. So here we are, this is what the arms look like. I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but the edges of the carbon fibre are all chamfered a 45-degree angle. Absolutely beautiful. And the way the motors works is the motors are mounted out here on the tips, and these are little Cobra motors, CW2204 2300s, and the 3 wires that come from the motor are under these kind of sticky pads and then are connecting up through these connectors into the bottom of the model down here. Now that's what this little cover's for, because of course these are going to be carrying all the electrics, so you want to be able to snap a cover over them once it's installed, and these longer thinner screws are just to hold that in place. So it's just a case of simply snapping them home, and once they're located they just push in like that. So we have one on that side, we have one on the other. There we go, beautiful. And again, this is another reason why not having the aerials in the straws can be very handy. What we're going to do is put it upside down. We're going to put 4 screws in each of these with these smaller ones. And again, it's actually got a little bit of blue Loctite on them already. Just little things like this that really make the kits like this really nice to put together. So I'm going to put each of those in. Then once those are in, pop the cover over the top, and then hold that in place with the single smaller screw, again, which actually has a little bit of blue Loctite on it. So let's do that, and then that should be step 2 of our instructions done. We'll come back, and then before we install the props, there's actually one additional step. I would say 2A is we're actually going to fire this up, and we're going to go through the on-screen display to do the radio calibration. So let me put this together, we'll come back and we'll do that next step before we do anything with the props. Altogether, this is what it looks like. So in the intervening time, I've put on the arms. I've also screwed on these little covers to keep all the bottom protected. I've also popped on these little, they're actually rubber grommets, they're not heat shrink, and popped on the antennas as well. And you can see the antennas are a little bit stubby just because we're using the XSR. The other thing I've done, you'll notice before we power it on for the first time, is I have popped on the antenna for the FPV bits and pieces. You should never power on a transmitter without an antenna plugged in. That's a sure way to cook everything. And I've also included all the straps as well. There are different size straps. There's actually 3 of these smaller ones, as we saw when we were unpacking it. 2 are the same size for the battery. There's one slightly longer one here, which is perfect for this Mobius mount. Now this Mobius mount actually undid the sticky tape on the back, so that's actually stuck on there. So that's going to be tricky if I want to change it, but like I said, I'm not really one of those kind of guys that likes to fly cranked over. That's not my natural flying style. This is the point that we would normally plug this into a PC connected up to CleanFlight and do the configuration. But this time we're actually going to use the power of the on-screen display and the extra things that Team Black Sheep have put into CleanFlight to do all the configuration without having to touch a PC or CleanFlight at all. The model should come pre-set up with all the PIDs and everything configured, so all we should need to do is plug it into a flight battery. So I've got a 4S battery here ready to plug in to try it with, and then what we need to do is connect to it and look at the image from the FPV transmitter through the goggles and use that with the radio. And what it's going to do is ask us to center the sticks, and once we're in that menu, then it'll ask us to move each of the controls, throttle, rudder, elevator, aileron, to the maximum limits, and also the mode switch too, and then that is essentially telling the model what to do. If, however, you want to set it up with CleanFlight, and again go back and watch the original PowerCube series where we actually did it that way, then what you can do is also import all of those settings into the on-screen display. Now the reason that you do it that way is that once this is set up at the field, pretty much everything is configurable through the on-screen display, through the FPV goggles, using your sticks on the transmitter, which is part of the power of this system from Team Black Sheep. The challenge, of course, is that if you set everything up through CleanFlight, the system in the TBS Power Cube, the Core Pro and everything else doesn't know about that, so it has to kind of learn those settings from CleanFlight. So CleanFlight, go and watch the other video. Let's get ready to power this little guy on, and then we'll actually record the image as we go through, and I'll show you the setup process. Once we've finished it, we can pop the props on and we're ready for our test hover. So just about to power it on for the first time, we have our transmitter on, we have our goggles on so I can record the image that you're going to see, and I've also got a little wooden stick that we can use to actually change the modes. Now the three buttons here, you can just see them, are on the side of the on-screen display. The middle one is enter, the sides are up and down. We just might need access to that when we set it up, because that is how you navigate around the menus before you get everything set up. Now by default, I think it might start with wanting PPM. We have it all set up with S-Bus. So we need to tell it that it's actually looking for S-Bus, and then it'll configure the flight controller so that we can continue the process. But I might need to press that middle button. So let's plug it in. What it's asking us to do is to center our sticks on the radio. So let me just move the model out of the way so you can see the radio. So here's the radio we're using at the moment. We're going to center both of our sticks, leave them there. Now it's going to ask us to move the throttle. So move throttle full up and hold it there. So we'll do that. Press OK. Move throttle full down and hold it there. OK. Move roll full right. Roll is aileron, which is this, so we're going to go full right. And then we're going to go full left. Move pitch full up. We're going to go up on the aileron. Move it full down and hold it there. So all we're doing is we're just following the instructions on the screen. You're full right. Full left. Move mode full up. Now we can decide on which switch you want to use. If you've got one set in the radio, you're going to use this one. I'm going to use one of these on the shoulder here. We'll use this one. RC calibration complete. So now we have everything working. That looks positive. Now I've kept the lens cap on through the entire process. Let me just take that off so that we can make sure the camera and everything's working fine. Look at that. Awesome. Right, now we have it ready. And just that. Look at that. There we go. Wonderful. Everything seems to be working. The last thing to check is, can we arm the board? So we're going to put throttle to the lowest position, right hand side. Make sure the motors aren't touching anything to arm it. There we go. Motors are running. Disarmed. Perfect. Okay, now it's time to put the props on. So to attach the props, we're going to do it in exactly the same way as we do with all of the CleanFlight models. So these two motors are going to go clockwise, so we're going to need props on that way round, and these two are going to go anti-clockwise. So let me just pop the props on here. There are bolts in the kit, and when we finish we can do a quick test hover. We're almost there. So out in the garden, just like we always do, a very quick test hover just to make sure it takes off, that all of the controls are working, and that calibration routine that we went through with the on-screen display is working, and it's working fine. So time to take it out to a larger field and let it off the chain. So here we have the model itself, sat in the grass. It's a very windy day today. There are lots of clouds around and an awful lot of high wind. So I'll do my best to control it and keep it in a position where Mrs. Painless 360 can use the camera to actually catch this thing in flight, and we'll show you what it's like in action. The model's hovering about 40% throttle, and as you can see here, those lights at the back are nice and easy to see, so it's great for orientation. And with those motors and props, it is very aggressive and very responsive on the sticks. FPV flight is fantastic and really good fun. Line of sight flying isn't as exciting, just because as soon as it gets away, like all of these smaller quads, it becomes just a little dot in the sky. So now we've had a quick fly, we've gone through all of those pieces, let's go back to the bench and I'll give you my final thoughts. This is a really nice model to fly. As you saw in the video, it flies beautifully and has absolutely tons of power. On ours, you can see that 1800 mAh battery just about fits on the frame. The challenge that you have if you use a battery as big as this is a couple of things. One, it will impact the flight performance, so you'll find a lot of people will fly it on a far smaller battery, get shorter flight times, but it will actually give you a much more punchy response to the throttle. The other challenge you have if you use a really big battery like this is the only way I could get this thing to actually balance is by putting our GoPro at the front. Any other smaller camera like a Mobius or something else just wouldn't allow it to balance out. So for me to fly mine, I always have to have my Hero 3 GoPro stood at the front. The other thing as well is, I know I'm going to get asked the question, so I'll cover it now. I've tried it with other cameras. The mounts here are designed specifically for this camera, so if you have another action cam like one of the Turnigy's or the Air cameras or those things that are slightly deeper, it doesn't fit in as well at all, so you do have to be a little bit careful about that. Apart from that, other commentary here is in practice it does appear to be pretty bulletproof. I know there has been commentary about the fact that things have been breaking. I think you have to be fantastically unlucky to break this. The stuff that I've been doing with it here, it has absorbed without any problems at all. This monocoque body is really strong. It's a single piece of carbon fibre, and compared to something like a ZMR or a QAV or a similar frame that we've put things like the Power Cube into, this has an awful lot of strength and rigidity. So hopefully that video helps for those of you that are going to put one of these together. Now you know how to put it together, configure it using the on-screen display and take it out there and give it a flight. If you're looking at this for your first ever quadcopter, my advice would be this probably isn't for you. This is probably something for somebody that's already had a quadcopter or two, or has experience actually building these things. I don't imagine that the high-end racers are going to be using this as well. They'll be using quite exotic, lightweight, minimum frames to give them the best performance and response to throttle and control inputs. But for those of us that are kind of not new pilots but also not professional FPV racers that want the absolute ultimate, this is a fantastic model. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.